The moment my fingers brushed the restaurant door handle, someone caught my wrist from behind. The grip was firm but controlled, not violent, urgent. Before I could react, I was guided swiftly down a narrow hallway and into a small office. The door closed. Then it locked. "Please stay calm, ma'am," the man said in a low voice. "What I'm about to show you is difficult. I need you to be strong." Those words drained the breath from my chest. "My name is Claire Whitman. I am not a woman easily unsettled. I run the logistics company my father built from nothing, a business that survived strikes, lawsuits, and ruthless competitors. I make decisions with numbers, not emotions. I do not panic." But standing in that office, staring at a wall of glowing security screens, I felt something cold settle deep in my stomach. A quiet certainty that my life, everything I thought I understood, was about to fracture. An hour earlier, my world had looked perfect. It was our third wedding anniversary. The restaurant sat high above the city, glass walls framing endless lights that shimmered like stars. The atmosphere was calm, refined, expensive. The kind of place people chose to celebrate milestones. Daniel sat beside me, close enough that his arm brushed mine. He looked exactly the way everyone described him: composed, attentive, dependable. Across the table sat his mother, Eleanora Whitman, elegant and sharply observant, and Brooke Miller, the woman Daniel had always introduced as his foster sister. Brooke was younger, soft-spoken, always hovering just a little too close to him. Daniel asked how I was feeling. I admitted the truth, that I'd been struggling with headaches and restless nights. Eleanora clicked her tongue sympathetically and said stress was common for women in leadership. Brooke nodded, refilling my wine before I even noticed my glass was low. "Let Daniel handle more things," Eleanora said smoothly. "You've carried enough." I smiled, grateful. Looking back, that gratitude feels foolish. Daniel cut my steak for me, something he'd started doing months earlier. People nearby noticed and smiled. It looked loving, protective. Brooke watched with an unreadable expression, her eyes sharp even as her smile stayed soft. They all told me the same thing in different words: rest, trust us, let go. Love, I would later realize, is often the disguise manipulation wears best. When the bill came, Daniel paid without hesitation. He insisted it was his responsibility. I didn't argue. I didn't notice how rehearsed everything felt, how every comment seemed designed to guide me gently toward dependence. Outside, the city noise rushed back in waves. Daniel draped his jacket over my shoulders. Halfway to the car, my stomach dropped. My purse was gone. I searched my memory frantically. Phone, wallet, documents, everything important. I told Daniel, embarrassed and annoyed with myself. He reacted instantly, too smoothly. He said not to worry, that it was fine, that we'd handle it. I suggested going back alone. The restaurant was close. He hesitated just long enough to look concerned, then agreed. He ordered a ride for me, kissed my forehead, and watched as the car pulled away. I looked back once. Daniel stood under the streetlight, completely still, watching me leave. His expression gave nothing away. At the time, I told myself I was lucky. The restaurant was quiet when I returned. Chairs were stacked. The lights dimmed. As I stepped inside, the manager approached me quickly. Samuel Brooks. I remembered his name from earlier introductions. His face was pale. Before I could speak, he gently took my arm. "Please don't panic," he said. "But I need you to come with me. Now." He led me to his office without explaining. The door locked behind us. The sound echoed louder than it should have. "I review footage every night," he said, his voice careful. "Something about your table didn't sit right with me." He turned the largest monitor toward me. The screen showed our table from above. A timestamp marked the moment I'd stood up and walked away. "Please," he said quietly, "brace yourself." The footage played. I watched myself leave. My chair sat empty. My purse rested where I'd left it. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then Daniel's expression changed. The warmth vanished. He scanned the room, not casually, but deliberately. His hand slid into my purse. He pulled out my supplement bottle, unscrewed the cap, and poured the pills into a napkin. Then he reached into his pocket and removed another packet, pills identical in shape and color. He replaced them. Across the table, Eleanora watched with amusement. Brooke leaned closer, smiling. They raised their glasses. I felt dizzy, like the floor had shifted beneath me. Samuel placed a bottle on the desk, my real supplements. He explained everything calmly. The pills Daniel had given me weren't vitamins. They were illegal psychotropic drugs, designed to cause confusion, memory gaps, emotional instability, symptoms that mimicked mental illness. It wasn't about hurting me. It was about discrediting me. My phone buzzed. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. I answered with a steady voice. I told him the purse had been found. I thanked him for worrying. I said I was coming home. When the call ended, my hands shook, but my mind was sharp. At home, Daniel greeted me with relief and affection. A glass of water waited on the table. The same white bottle sat beside it. He offered me a pill and watched carefully as I pretended to swallow. That night, I didn't sleep. I searched the bedroom while he rested. Behind a framed artwork Eleonora had gifted me, I found a hidden speaker, a blinking red light. The whispers I'd been hearing weren't hallucinations. Later, I overheard Daniel and Brooke downstairs, too close, too intimate. They talked about pills working, about control, about after tomorrow. I recorded everything. By morning, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Morning light crept into the bedroom like nothing had changed. Daniel slept beside me, his breathing steady, his arm draped loosely across the mattress where I lay stiff and awake. I watched the ceiling for a long time, letting the panic fade into something colder and more useful, fear clouds judgment. I couldn't afford that anymore. When I finally rose, I moved slowly, deliberately. I let my shoulders slump. I let my hands tremble just enough to be believable. By the time I entered the kitchen, I was already playing the role they had written for me. Daniel stood at the counter pouring coffee. He turned when he heard me and searched my face carefully. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Not really," I said softly. "My head feels heavy." Concern flickered across his expression, but it didn't reach his eyes. He nodded, satisfied. "You should rest today. I'll take care of things." That sentence confirmed everything. An hour later, Daniel and Eleonora left the house together, claiming errands. The moment their car disappeared down the street, I locked every door and moved quickly. I called Andrew Collins. Andrew had been my father's attorney long before he became mine. He was meticulous, unemotional, and allergic to half-truths. When I told him I needed him immediately, and that my safety might be compromised, he didn't ask questions. He simply said, "I'm on my way." He arrived through the back entrance within 30 minutes. I showed him everything: the photos of the pill bottles, the hidden speaker, the audio recording of Daniel and Brooke discussing my removal like a business transaction. Andrew listened silently, his jaw tightening. "This isn't just betrayal," he said when I finished. "It's premeditated fraud, abuse, conspiracy." We moved to Daniel's home office. The door was locked, as always. I remembered where he hid the spare key, inside a ceramic planter he insisted no one ever touched. The lock opened easily. Inside, the room felt sterile, too organized. Andrew went straight to the small safe tucked behind the bookshelf. I knew the code without thinking. Eleonora's birthday. The safe opened. Inside were documents stacked neatly, labeled, prepared. A petition requesting legal control over my assets. A forged psychiatric evaluation describing paranoia, auditory hallucinations, emotional instability. Bank records showing transfers from my company accounts into private ones belonging to Daniel, Eleonora, and Brooke. Andrew exhaled slowly. They were close, very close. Then he found the passport. Brooke Miller was not Brooke Miller. The name inside was different. The photograph was unmistakably her. Tucked between the pages was a faded photograph, Daniel and Brooke standing together in a small civil ceremony, married, years before Daniel ever met me. I didn't feel anger, I felt clarity. Andrew photographed everything, secured original documents, and instructed me to return everything exactly as it had been. We were almost finished when tires crunched on the driveway. "They're back," I whispered. Andrew stepped into the closet just as the office door opened. Daniel entered first. I let my posture collapse, my expression slack. "I heard voices," I murmured. "They told me to come here." Daniel's suspicion melted into relief. He guided me gently away, his grip firm. "It's okay," he said softly. "We'll handle this." The next day was the board meeting. Daniel drove. I leaned against the window, unfocused, silent. He held my hand tightly, like a guardian guiding someone fragile. You don't need to speak, he said. Just listen. Hudson Tower rose ahead of us. Glass, steel, and my father's name etched into its foundation. I felt steadied just looking at it. Inside the boardroom, eyes followed me. Concern, doubt, pity. Daniel began calmly, speaking of responsibility and protection. Then he turned to me. He spoke of my health, my confusion. Documents circulated. A man in a white coat stood near the wall watching me. Would you like to say anything? Daniel asked, warning in his eyes. I stayed silent. The tension thickened. Whispers followed. Daniel pressed on, suggesting temporary authority transfer. That was when I stood. The movement alone startled the room. My back straightened. The fog vanished. I am not unwell, I said clearly. And I am not confused. Daniel froze. He gestured toward the doctor. This is exactly what I feared, he said. The doors opened. Andrew walked in first. Behind him were 2 officers and Samuel Brooks. Gasps filled the room. I spoke calmly. I explained everything. Andrew played the footage, the audio, the records, the marriage photo. Daniel tried to stand. The officer stopped him. The vote was immediate. As Daniel was led away, he looked at me in disbelief. I felt no triumph, only freedom. The boardroom emptied slowly after Daniel was led away in handcuffs. Voices dropped to hushed murmurs. Some members avoided my eyes, ashamed of how easily doubt had replaced trust. Others offered quiet apologies, brief nods of respect. I accepted them all without comment. Vindication did not need applause. Eleonora remained seated long after everyone else had gone. Her posture was still perfect, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Only her face betrayed her, colorless, rigid, as if carved from stone. Brooke sat beside her, shoulders shaking, mascara streaking her cheeks. She had not spoken a word since the footage played. Officers returned to escort them out. Brooke finally looked at me then, her eyes full of something between rage and desperation. You were never supposed to fight back, she whispered. I met her gaze calmly. That was your first mistake. They were taken away, the doors closed. Silence settled. Andrew gathered his files and placed a steady hand on my shoulder. You handled that flawlessly, he said. Now comes the cleanup. The cleanup took weeks. Daniel was formally charged with fraud, financial abuse, conspiracy, and the illegal administration of controlled substances. Eleanor's accounts were frozen pending investigation. Brooke's real identity unraveled quickly. False records, fabricated histories, carefully constructed lies that collapsed under scrutiny. The company stabilized faster than anyone expected. Emergency board meetings reinstated me as sole authority. Public statements were carefully worded, focusing on accountability and transparency rather than scandal. Investors responded with cautious confidence. My father's legacy remained intact. At home, I packed methodically. Room by room, I reclaimed what belonged to me and discarded what did not. I found more listening devices hidden in unexpected places, behind vents, inside decorative objects Eleonora had gifted me. Each discovery felt less shocking than the last. The house felt different once their presence was gone. Lighter, quieter, honest. One evening, weeks later, I stood alone in the living room, holding the final box. This place had been a stage, a set designed to convince me I was protected while stripping me of control. I locked the door behind me and never returned. The legal process moved forward relentlessly. Daniel tried once to contact me through his attorney, requesting a conversation for closure. I declined. Closure is not something you grant your betrayer. It is something you claim for yourself. The media eventually moved on. Scandals always fade when there's no longer drama to feed them. My name remained clean. Stronger, even. Quiet resilience speaks louder than spectacle. Months later, I received a letter from Samuel Brooks. It was brief. He wrote that he'd never doubted doing the right thing, but he was grateful I had survived long enough to prove it mattered. I kept the letter. On the anniversary of my father's death, I stood at the top floor of Hudson Tower, looking out over the city. The same lights I'd admired from the restaurant that night stretched endlessly before me. They no longer felt harmless. They felt real. Power, I realized, does not come from control over others. It comes from clarity, knowing who you are when everything familiar turns against you. I had been underestimated, reduced, almost erased. But silence had protected me. Observation had armed me, and patience had delivered justice. I walked back into the boardroom alone, took my seat at the head of the table, and began the meeting on my terms. The story they tried to write for me ended the moment I chose to speak. And this time, the ending belonged to me.